Have you ever caught yourself wondering what someone's body language really means? Not just the obvious smiles or waves, but those subtle, almost secret signs that reveal a deeper layer, like desire, curiosity, or even longing. Imagine sitting across from someone in a cozy cafe, the air thick with unspoken words. She laughs at your joke, leans in just a little closer than necessary, and you swear you feel a spark. But could it be just your imagination playing tricks? What if I told you that beneath these small gestures lies a hidden language, one that Carl Jung might say reveals the unconscious desires we try to keep buried? I remember an afternoon back in April 2023 when I met Laura, a graphic designer working in downtown Chicago. The smell of fresh espresso mingled with the faint buzz of city noise outside. We talked for hours about art and life. What struck me wasn't what she said, but how she moved. How her foot tapped rhythmically under the table, or how she brushed her hair behind her ear repeatedly. At first, I thought she was just nervous, or maybe tired. Then something shifted during our conversation. She began mirroring my posture subtly, a sign I later recognized as one indicating rapport and attraction. But what really caught me off guard was how often her eyes darted to my lips when she spoke. It was like there was this silent invitation hidden between words. This makes me wonder, how often do we overlook these quiet signals simply because we're waiting for loud declarations or clear-cut signs? The truth is, human beings communicate far more with their bodies than their mouths. Carl Jung's ideas help us see that much of what influences our connections is beneath the surface, in the realm of symbols, unconscious gestures, and archetypal patterns embedded deeply within us. So today, let's explore this fascinating terrain, 9 secret signs in her body language that might be telling you she desires you without saying a word aloud. But before diving into these signals, it's important to set something straight. This isn't about manipulation or reading minds like some kind of magician. It's about tuning in to the subtle rhythms of human interaction, those nuances that can tell us when someone feels safe enough to reveal vulnerability or interest through movement and posture. Let's start with one of the most overlooked but powerful indicators: the way she subconsciously opens up her body toward you. Think about moments when someone feels closed off, arms crossed tight against the chest, or legs tucked away like they're building a fortress around themselves. Now, contrast that with someone whose shoulders relax and whose torso angles slightly toward you. This openness is more than polite. It signals trust and attraction at an instinctive level. I recall an encounter with Emily, a literature professor from Boston, whom I met during a weekend writing retreat in October 2022. We shared an old wooden bench under amber autumn leaves falling softly around us. As we talked about poetry and dreams, I noticed she would casually uncross her arms after initially keeping them folded. A subtle shift, not forced, but natural, and lean forward slightly whenever I shared something personal. These weren't grand gestures, but almost imperceptible movements that spoke volumes. Why does this matter? Jung believed that our bodies express what our conscious mind often conceals. When someone opens their body toward another unconsciously, it reflects a lowering of defenses, a readiness to engage emotionally or physically. Here's an exercise that might sound simple, but can reveal so much if done mindfully. Next time you're with someone you're interested in, or even just curious about, observe how their posture changes throughout your interaction. Are their limbs relaxed? Do they turn their torso toward you naturally as if inviting connection? Or do they seem tense and closed off despite friendly words? Try mirroring their posture subtly, not mimicking, but gently aligning your stance to theirs, and see how their body responds over time. This alignment creates empathy at a nonverbal level and can help both parties feel more attuned. It might feel awkward at first because we're not used to paying such close attention to physical signals beyond facial expressions or verbal cues. But think of it as learning another language, a language written not in letters, but in muscle memory and tiny shifts. Of course, context matters deeply here too. Someone might open up physically because they're comfortable generally, or simply enjoy your company platonically without romantic interest involved at all. That's why combining multiple signs rather than fixating on just one can give a clearer picture. If this is resonating so far, and I hope it is, subscribe to the channel for more insights where we unpack these subtle interactions grounded in psychology and real-life stories. Now imagine this. Sarah works as an urban planner in Seattle. She has this habit when engaged deeply, she tilts her head slightly while maintaining eye contact and lets one shoulder drop lower than the other, as though unconsciously relaxing into the moment shared with someone special. That tilt? It's not random. According to observations linked back to Jungian thought patterns related to vulnerability and receptivity, tilting one's head exposes part of the neck, a traditionally vulnerable area, which often happens when trust builds beneath conscious awareness. And what about those micro-movements, the quick flicks of fingers brushing against lips, or subtle touching of hair repeatedly during conversations? These are classic signs hinting at nervous excitement mixed with desire, the kind that can be masked by laughter but felt palpably by anyone attuned into body language's delicate tunes. So here's another practice. Next time you talk to someone who interests you, notice if they touch their face often, specifically around lips or cheeks, in ways that don't seem related to comfort, like scratching an itch, but rather as self-soothing motions triggered by emotional arousal. You can gently test this by observing whether these gestures become more frequent when you're sharing intimate thoughts compared to casual chatting about everyday stuff like weather or work deadlines. However tempting it might be to jump straight into conclusions, she must like me. Resist rushing judgment based on one signal alone. That's where many get stuck, misreading intentions. Instead, use it as part of a bigger tapestry woven from several nonverbal hints emerging naturally over time. Let me pause here for a moment, because sometimes diving deep into reading others' bodies can backfire if we neglect ourselves along the way. Have you noticed how often we miss our own internal signals when focused outward? Maybe sensing tension creeping up unknowingly, or shutting down emotionally despite physical openness. Jung emphasized balancing inner awareness alongside external observation. That's where genuine connection blossoms beyond superficial guessing games. For now, though, practice observing openness versus closedness in others without immediate attachment to meaning. Think of it as tuning your antenna rather than decoding complex messages instantly. So next time you're with someone intriguing, or even just people watching somewhere bustling like Central Park on a sunny afternoon, try quietly noticing who turns toward whom naturally without verbal prompts. Does it change how present or connected you feel? If yes, or maybe even if no, I'd love for you to share your thoughts below, because every observation adds richness to understanding human connection beyond cliches and guesswork. And hey, if this sparks curiosity about uncovering more hidden layers behind everyday encounters, grounded not only in body language, but also in psychological depth, inspired by analytical psychology frameworks, there's plenty ahead waiting for us together. For now, though, take note today whenever someone opens physically toward you unexpectedly. It might be their way of revealing something deeper without saying a single word aloud. What would happen if instead of glossing over those small cues, we leaned in, just not too much, to honor them? Would relationships shift subtly yet profoundly? That question lingers longer than any fleeting glance ever could. It's fascinating how our bodies betray secrets even when our minds try to remain silent. Moving beyond openness, have you ever noticed how a slight, unintentional smile can reveal hidden feelings? Not the obvious grin after a joke, but that brief twitch at the corner of her lips, the kind that slips out before she catches herself. This micro-expression is a treasure trove of subconscious communication. Take Olivia, for instance, who I met at a jazz bar in New Orleans one humid summer evening back in 2023. The place was dimly lit with red and gold hues casting shadows on the walls, and the air smelled faintly of whiskey and old wood. We were deep in conversation about music and life when she smiled, not broadly, but just for a split second when I mentioned a shared favorite artist. It was so fleeting I almost missed it, but that tiny smile held an ocean of warmth that words couldn't capture. Why does this matter? In Jungian terms, these micro-expressions act like brief windows into the unconscious mind, revealing feelings before the conscious self intervenes with social filters or hesitation. They're spontaneous flashes that betray genuine emotion, often connected to attraction or desire. You might be wondering, how can you notice these? Here's a simple exercise you can try next time you're with someone whose feelings you want to understand better. Watch their face closely while they speak or listen. Instead of focusing on large expressions, look for tiny changes around their eyes and mouth, those subtle twitches or brief smiles that don't last long but feel authentic. Try pairing this observation with noting when these micro-smiles occurred during your conversation. Is it when you say something personal? Or maybe when you share a joke that resonates? This can give clues about moments when she feels emotionally connected or interested. Remember, though, it's not about catching people off guard or reading them like an open book. It's about tuning in more attentively to natural human responses, often missed in our busy lives. Now, shifting gears slightly, what about eye contact? Not the staring contest kind, which is more awkward than revealing, but the way her gaze behaves during an interaction. I recall meeting Jasmine, an art curator from Brooklyn, at an outdoor gallery event in May 2024. The spring breeze carried scents of blooming lilacs and fresh paint from nearby installations. As we talked beneath strings of lights swaying gently overhead, something curious happened with her eyes. They would follow my movements softly but intentionally. Sometimes her pupils dilated noticeably when our eyes met briefly. Why does pupil dilation matter here? It's one of those subtle physiological responses linked to arousal and interest that many overlook simply because it's involuntary and invisible unless observed closely under good lighting conditions. Jung's psychological framework suggests that such nonverbal cues are part of a deeper symbolic language rooted in evolutionary survival mechanisms, signaling availability and engagement beyond spoken language. Here's a practical tip. Next time you're talking with someone new, or perhaps someone familiar but intriguing in a different way, pay attention to how their gaze shifts during your conversation. Do they maintain gentle eye contact longer than usual? Do their pupils seem larger at certain moments? If observing pupil size sounds tricky, because honestly it can be, focus instead on the quality of eye contact. Is it warm and inviting, shy and fleeting, or cold and dismissive? Try an exercise where you practice maintaining steady but soft eye contact yourself while engaging genuinely. Notice how this affects both your comfort level and possibly hers too. One unexpected benefit is that attentive eye contact tends to lower social barriers, a cornerstone for any connection blossoming from attraction or trust. But here's where things get interesting. Sometimes desire hides behind playful teasing gestures, a dance between showing interest and holding back just enough to spark curiosity. I once met Hannah at a small cafe tucked away in Portland's Pearl District during an early autumn weekend in 2023. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans mixed with rain-soaked pavement outside as we shared stories over warm mugs. She had this habit of lightly touching my arm after making a witty comment, not enough to be overtly flirtatious, but enough to create a ripple beneath the surface tension. That gesture wasn't accidental. It was an invitation, cloaked in casualness, designed to test boundaries without risking vulnerability outright. From a Jungian viewpoint, such behavior reflects archetypal patterns related to playfulness as well as shadow integration, where aspects of desire are expressed indirectly due to internal conflict between longing and societal rules or personal fears. So, how can you recognize this playful yet meaningful touch in everyday life? A simple exercise involves becoming more mindful about physical contact during conversations, not just noticing if she touches you, but also how she does it. Is it brief yet lingering? Does it coincide with laughter or teasing remarks? Is there hesitancy mixed with boldness? You might even experiment gently yourself by introducing light touches, for example, brushing away a stray hair or tapping her hand lightly during shared laughter to gauge reciprocity without pushing limits uncomfortably. What makes these touches potent is their ambiguity. They leave room for imagination, which fuels desire more effectively than explicit declarations sometimes do. Thinking about all this reminds me how complex yet beautifully orchestrated human interactions are. We often assume people communicate desires verbally first because it's easier to grasp. However, much like Jung explored through symbols and dreams as pathways into unconscious truths, the body whispers its stories constantly if we pay attention carefully enough. And speaking of paying attention, I'm curious now, have you noticed moments where casual touches or playful gestures changed the tone of your interactions unexpectedly? Maybe those brief contacts sparked new levels of connection without anyone spelling things out directly. Feel free to share your experiences below, because understanding these nuances enriches how we relate authentically beyond just guessing games based on words alone. Oh, and by the way, if unraveling these silent languages feels like diving into endless fascination, which it truly is, there's material I've prepared exploring deeper layers inspired by Carl Jung's observations intertwined with real-life encounters like these mentioned today. It might help those wanting practical tools alongside psychological insights navigate relationships more mindfully. Just something for when curiosity calls again down this path we're exploring together. For now, though, try tuning in to those little smiles hiding beneath bigger expressions. Watch how eyes behave, noticing softness versus avoidance. Observe gentle touches carrying unspoken questions wrapped in humor and warmth. This trio of signs often speaks louder than any verbal cue because they emerge naturally from underlying emotional currents swirling beneath surface interactions. Currents shaped by ancient instincts mixed with modern social dances we all perform daily, whether consciously aware or not. Maybe next time you find yourself caught up in wondering what she really means, these subtle clues will offer clearer glimpses instead of foggy guesses, and maybe even help open doors toward deeper conversations where words eventually catch up with what bodies have been saying all along. Human connection never ceases to amaze me, even through its quietest signals hidden right under our noses, yet so easy to miss until we pause long enough to really see them unfold naturally around us. There's a gesture so subtle yet profoundly telling that it often slips past unnoticed. The way she synchronizes her breathing with yours during conversation. Not something we consciously control, but an unconscious rhythm that reveals deep resonance. It's as if two hearts begin to quietly beat in tandem, a dance beyond words or deliberate action. I recall meeting Mia, a software developer from Austin, at a weekend tech conference in late 2023. During a break between sessions, we found ourselves sitting side by side on a bench outside the venue. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint aroma of coffee from nearby stalls. As we chatted about challenges in our work and favorite hobbies, I became aware, almost hypnotically, of how her breaths matched mine. Slow inhales paired with mine, gentle exhales sinking effortlessly without conscious effort. It struck me as more than coincidence. It was an embodied expression of connection and attunement that words could never fully describe. This unconscious mirroring is deeply rooted in human biology and psychology, a primal form of empathy and desire that Jung's theories touch upon when discussing the interplay between conscious awareness and instinctual drives. Now, for an exercise you can try. Next time you're engaged in meaningful conversation, take a subtle moment to notice not just what's said, but also how your breathing aligns or doesn't with the other person's. Are your rhythms naturally falling into sync? If not, try gently slowing your own breath to see if it influences theirs. This isn't about controlling someone else's physiology, but about tuning in to shared presence, a quiet dance signaling safety, interest, or desire beneath conscious awareness. This kind of bodily attunement often precedes verbal intimacy because it creates an unspoken bridge where both parties feel seen beyond surface appearances. It invites vulnerability without pressure. And here lies something I find endlessly fascinating. These physical echoes, the opening posture toward you, those tiny micro-smiles flashing too quickly to catch deliberately, eyes that soften and pupils dilate, revealing hidden depths, playful touches balanced on boundaries, and synchronized breathing all point toward one undeniable truth about desire. It's deeply relational and often expressed through nonverbal languages our minds struggle to articulate directly. Reflecting on this reminds me of how often we get caught up in analyzing behaviors or waiting for explicit signs, as if love or attraction came with clear instructions printed on labels. But human desire is messier. It hides behind layers of social conditioning, fears of rejection, personal histories, shadow aspects Jung would argue are parts of ourselves waiting for acknowledgement. When we learn to read these subtle bodily communications, not as puzzles to be solved, but as invitations to connect, we embrace complexity rather than reduce feelings to neat categories. This shift changes everything because it asks us to be present with uncertainty rather than rush towards certainty. It makes me think of something I experienced last year with Lena, a dance instructor from New York City who taught me more about presence than any textbook ever could. During an impromptu salsa class under twinkling rooftop lights in July 2023, our bodies found rhythms spontaneously without words guiding every move. That night taught me desire isn't always announced boldly. Sometimes it's whispered through shared movement, where trust grows in silence between steps. So what if we approached interactions not trying to decode every sign, but allowing space for these nonverbal expressions to breathe along spoken words? What if, instead of demanding clarity immediately, we leaned into nuance, welcoming ambiguity as part of authentic connection? Maybe then we'd stop forcing connections based on checklist signs or overthinking fleeting gestures, and instead notice when someone's body naturally softens near us, or their laughter carries just enough warmth suggesting, "I want this moment." We might see desire less as something complicated or intimidating, and more like an unfolding conversation happening simultaneously on many levels: physical, emotional, unconscious, all intertwined delicately beneath everyday encounters. And here lies another layer worth pondering. Sometimes the most powerful signals are those we give ourselves permission to recognize internally first before expecting them externally. Jung emphasized integration, not just noticing others' cues, but acknowledging our own responses honestly without judgment. What do you feel when you notice someone opening towards you physically? When you catch those micro smiles? When eyes meet softly? When hands brush playfully? Or when breath sinks unexpectedly? Allow yourself curiosity about your own sensations. They hold keys to understanding desire, not only as something out there, but within your experience too. I'm reminded now of a moment last fall during a quiet walk along Seattle's waterfront, where the crisp air mingled with salty sea breeze. I felt this gentle stirring inside while sharing silent company with someone special, not needing words, because presence itself spoke volumes through small movements and shared breath. That moment wasn't perfect by any standard. It had awkward pauses and unspoken uncertainties, but it was real, and realness often speaks louder than polished performances crafted out of fear or expectation. So maybe here's the invitation. Step lightly into noticing these hidden languages woven through body language around desire, not as clues for manipulation or certainty, but as poetry unfolding quietly beneath daily interaction patterns where meaning blooms over time. Letting go of rigid interpretations allows deeper empathy for ourselves and others, and opens doorways into richer relationships shaped by authenticity instead of guesswork or performance anxiety. If this resonates with you, even just slightly, I'd love to hear your reflections or stories below, because every unique experience enriches collective understanding far beyond theory alone. And since embracing such subtleties can sometimes feel overwhelming at first, because, let's face it, human connection rarely fits neat scripts, there are tools and guides blending psychological insight with practical approaches designed to help navigate these nuances gracefully whenever curiosity leads you back here again down this path together. For now, though, trust what you sense when bodies speak quietly around desire, even in moments still wrapped in ambiguity, and honor those whispers as part of your journey toward deeper connection and self-awareness. As Jung might imply through his explorations into symbols residing beneath consciousness, the language of bodies is ancient, yet ever new, elusive, yet profoundly human, chaotic, yet full of meaning, waiting patiently for us to listen attentively without haste or judgment. We don't have all answers, that much is certain, but perhaps the beauty lies precisely there, not knowing completely, yet daring enough to engage openly anyway, letting intuition guide us alongside reason, cultivating patience amid uncertainty while holding space for others' complexities alongside our own shadows, revealed softly through gestures unseen by casual glance. Desire is less a destination than an unfolding process, a mosaic assembled piece by piece through countless small moments where presence meets vulnerability at edges seldom illuminated by spotlighted speech alone. So, next time you wonder what she might be feeling beneath surface smiles or playful touches, remember this. True understanding arises not from rushing conclusions, but from cultivating awareness tuned finely enough to perceive whispers beneath noise, courage strong enough to embrace mystery without needing immediate clarity, compassion wide enough to hold imperfect humanity reflected back silently through those secretive gestures speaking volumes beyond words alone. What stories will emerge when you open yourself fully, not just watching, but truly seeing, and invite another into that shared space between spoken language and unspoken longing? There lies possibility waiting patiently, quietly, but unmistakably for those willing to listen deeply, not just with ears, but with heart and mind aligned gently in curious harmony, discovering together what it means to be truly seen, desired, and known beyond surface appearances evermore.